Jaya Radha Gokulananda, Radha Gokulananda, Radha Gokulananda, Shri Radhe. Jai. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, everyone. We're now going to start our Bhagavad Gita class for this evening. So if you'd like, please feel free to come over here so we can all listen. So today we're going to be discussing verse 2.8. So to begin with, I'm just going to start with Mangala Charan prayers. So please follow with me if you can. So you can repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'm just going to say the prayers, seeking the blessings of the spiritual masters and all other teachers in our lineage. So I'll say that now. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raguta Tamitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakamatam Scha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinubandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosate Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishvanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priya Panchakalpa Durubhesya Cha Kripasindhubheva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Vishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminati Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Vishesha Shunyavadi Pashitya Deshitarine. Hare Krishna, everyone, and thank you so much for coming here this evening, the Bhagavad Gita class. So as I mentioned, we discussing verse 2.8. So the format of this is we'd read the verse in Sanskrit, and if you all can repeat, even though you may not understand it, the Sanskrit is very powerful and it directly reaches the soul, and then we'll discuss the translation purport. Okay, so seeking all of your blessings so I can say something useful. So Sanskrit, if you could repeat after me. Nahi prapasyami mama panudyat yak shokam uchoshanam indriyanam avapya bhumav asapat namritam Rajyam Suranam Apichadipatyam. Okay. You can also repeat the English with me. I can find no means to drive away this grief, which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it, even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven. So I'll just read that again all in one go. I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it, even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven. So I'll read the purport written by Srila Prabhupada, and I won't read it all in one go. I'll read the first half, and then we can discuss it, and then I'll read the last paragraphs together, and we can then discuss that. So the purport. Although Arjuna was putting forward so many arguments based on knowledge of the principles of religion and moral codes, it appears that he was unable to solve his real problem without the help of a spiritual master, Lord Sri Krishna. He could understand that his so-called knowledge was useless in driving away his problems, which were drying up his whole existence, and it was impossible for him to solve such perplexities without the help of a spiritual master like Lord Krishna. Academic knowledge, scholarship, high position, etc. were all useless in solving the problems of life. Help can only be given by a spiritual master like Krishna. Therefore, the conclusion is that a spiritual master is 100% Krishna conscious, is a bona fide spiritual master, for he can solve the problems of life. Lord Chaitanya said that one who is a master in the science of Krishna consciousness, regardless of his social position, is a real spiritual master. Kipa vibra kipa nyasi shudra kena nai, ye Krishna tattva ve, say Guru Hai. It does not matter whether a person is Vipra, learned scholar in Vedic wisdom, or is born in a lower family, or is in the renounced order of life. If he is the master in the science of Krishna, he is a perfect and bona fide spiritual master. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 8.128. So without being a master in the science of Krishna consciousness, no one is a bona fide spiritual master. It is also said in the Vedic literature, Sat karma nipuno vipro mantra tantra visharadaha Vaishnavo guru nyasyad Vaishnava svapacho guru. A scholarly brahmana expert in all subjects of Vedic knowledge is unfit to become a spiritual master without being a Vaishnava, or expert in the science of Krishna consciousness. But a person born in a family of a lower caste can become a spiritual master if he is Vaishnava or Krishna conscious. So I'll stop here. I suppose the first few couple of paragraphs that I've just read is Srila Prabhupada talking about the need for a spiritual master. So for the broader context, chapter 1 of the Bhagavad Gita was where Arjuna was, putting forward many arguments based on principles of religion and moral code about why he should not fight. And then finally in the verse prior to this one, so verse 7, he finally says to Krishna, you know what, I'm confused about my duty. I've lost all composure because of miserly weakness. And in this condition, I'm telling you to tell me what is best for me. I'm your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So there's a very famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita where Arjuna actually surrenders onto Krishna and just tells him, like, look, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you please instruct me? So so Arjuna is carrying on with that. So in the verse prior, he's just said, I'm your disciple, surrendered to me unto you, please instruct me. And now he's saying that I have this grief in my heart which is drying up my senses. And even if I win the kingdom and get the sovereignty, I still won't be able to dispel the grief. So in this purport, Srila Prabhupada continues talking about the need for the spiritual master. So he says that we can have, this knowledge, we can have science, we can have a high birth, we can have wealth, we can have all the material things that we want, but we won't be able to solve the real problem without the need of a spiritual master. So my first question here for you all is, what is the real problem that Srila Prabhupada is talking about here, or the real problem that Arjuna is actually facing? Does anyone know or want to have a guess at it? Sorry, can you say that again? He doesn't know what his duty is, so that's his problem. Yes, because in the previous verse he also says that I'm confused about my duty. Yes, that's right. Any other? He doesn't have guidance, so that's his problem. Yeah, that's it. Anything else? There's no right or wrong, just whatever comes to your mind as you're reflecting. Yeah, he's lost faith in material enjoyment. Yeah, exactly. Because he says that, even if I win this unrivaled kingdom, and even if I live the pleasures of the demigods in heaven, I still won't be able to drive away this grief. So it's correct what you said. These are the problems. And I've also collected one other problem, which is the problem of the soul. So the problem of the soul is ultimately rooted in forgetfulness of its true identity as an eternal spiritual being, Jivatma, and its inherent connection with Krishna. This forgetfulness leads to an identification with the temporary material body and pursuit of temporary material happiness, which is ultimately unsatisfying. So really our real problem is that we're actually spirit souls, and we're spiritual beings trapped in this material world. And as spiritual beings, we have the right to happiness. That's what we're used to, the quality of the soul is Sat Chit Ananda. So it's pure, it's real, it's eternal, and it's Ananda, it's happiness. So it makes sense why we're trying to find that happiness, but we're just trying to find it in the wrong way, in the wrong form. And so actually our real problem is that we're trapped in this material world trying to find happiness in the wrong place. And so in order for us to come out of that, we can't take shelter of a material solution, which is what we often try to do, which is what Srila Prabhupada's talking about, the high birth, the wealth, all the things material are not going to help you. So really we need a spiritual solution, and Srila Prabhupada gives us here that to drive away all the grief that we have that dries us up. Nothing material can really give that to us. It's only, spiritual science that can give that to us, Krishna that can give that to us. But in order for us to get that, we need the spiritual master. So also got some evidence for that, taken from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which talks about the need of the spirit soul. So this is from Canto 1, Chapter 2, verse 8. It says, the need of the spirit soul is that he wants to get out of the limited sphere of the material bondage and fulfill his desire for complete freedom. He wants to get out of the covered walls of the greater universe. He wants to see the free light and spirit. That complete freedom is achieved when he meets the complete spirit, the personality of Godhead. There's a dormant affection for God within everyone. Spiritual existence is manifested through the ghost body and mind in the form of perverted affection for gross and subtle matter. Therefore, we have to engage ourselves in occupational engagements that evoke our divine consciousness. So you can actually see that the spirit soul is trapped here, and he's trying to get out of this greater universe, and he wants to be completely free. But the freedom doesn't exist here like the soul initially thought. The freedom actually exists when the spirit meets Krishna, when the spirit meets God. So that's that. So one might think, okay, fine, if nothing material is going to dry up that grief or solve my problems, then why can't I go and approach these spiritual subjects myself? Why can't I, read the Bhagavad Gita or, obtain the spiritual knowledge by myself? Why do I need the spiritual master? Well, for one, Krishna says that the spiritual master is essential in our sojourn. So in verse 4.34 of the Bhagavad Gita, a very famous verse, Krishna says, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So Krishna gives this as a direct instruction in the Bhagavad Gita about why we should have a spiritual master. But through his own example, again and again, he has also shown the need to actually have a spiritual master. So as Krishna in his pastime, his spiritual master was Sandipani Muni. Then Lord Ram as well, who we have here on the altar. He also had a spiritual master, Lord Chaitanya, who also came down here also had a spiritual master. So Krishna shows through his own example that the spiritual master is essential for us. Spiritual master is also there for us to practice surrender. So, because we can't actually see Krishna, Krishna gives us the opportunity to serve him, but via the spiritual master. So by following the orders of the spiritual master, we're actually following the orders of Krishna in a tangible way. And we also say every morning in the Gurvashtakam prayers here at the temple that the spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord, because he's the most confidential servitor of the Lord, that's acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisances on the lotus feet of a spiritual master. So, the reason we can't do it by ourselves is, one, because Krishna says we need a spiritual master, but two, because the essence of the devotional process is that we have to surrender unto Krishna, and because we can't see him, we can do that only through the spiritual master. And then the last point is Vedic methodologies of learning are different. So when we try to approach learning anything here in the material world, the scientific process is one where we utilize our senses, and it's through direct perception, right? But we can only really learn transcendental matters via transcendental methods. So in the material world, the epistemology, or the method by which we understand knowledge, is, like I said, it's the senses and experience. But actually, Vedic knowledge refutes this, because it says very clear that our senses are imperfect. Our experiences are tainted by our past experiences, and we see through the lenses of our past experiences. So actually, this method of relying on our senses and our experiences is not the way in which we obtain the knowledge to get out of this material world. So really, there's three methodologies which are acknowledged in the scriptures to get this knowledge. So one is direct perception, which is prataksha. Like I said, it's knowledge through one's own senses and direct experience. But as we know, we can't always see what is really in front of us. We can't always hear. Our senses are flawed, so we can't completely rely on that. Second is logical inference, anuman, which is drawing conclusions based on our observation and reasoning. But so this is where, if you were to see smoke, you would know that, okay, there's a fire there, right? But actually, even this methodology is limited in its scope, especially when applied to spiritual matters. So an example is like, if you were on a very, very cloudy, grey day in England, look at the sky, you might not see a single sun ray and not see the sun, and you might say, well, the sun's not there, but actually the sun is there, it's just covered by the clouds. So even anuman, or logical inference, isn't good enough. So in the Vedic way of obtaining knowledge is through the third, which is called Shabda Brahman, or hearing from authorities. This is the most important epistemology for us, and it involves receiving this knowledge from reliable sources, such as the Vedic scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and also the realized spiritual masters and gurus who are connected to the divine. So Srila Prabhupada and reading his purports and stuff. And it's through this that we understand the nature of God, the soul, and the path of spiritual liberation. So we saw that here very quickly, the reason we need the spiritual master is because Krishna says we need him. It's our way to practice surrender, and actually it is the Vedic methodology, Shabda Brahman, in which we actually obtain this knowledge. And even when we kind of and Srila Prabhupada talks about this here, that a spiritual master is not one who's learned in Vedic wisdom. He says it does not matter if a person is a Vipra or born in a low family. The main thing is that he's the perfect spiritual master based on some other things that we'll talk about. So actually, without the spiritual master, we might be even able to recite all the verses and very theoretically talk about the spiritual science, but actually it's the spiritual master who really allows us to really internalize that knowledge and to have the kind of deep realizations which allow us to make those shifts. So, we talked about, Arjuna's need for the spiritual master and how he's finally realized that no matter what material things that he has at his disposal, or even if he was to get, all the wealth and everything, he would still have this grief in his heart, which is what we all have actually. And so he surrendered on his spiritual master. So we talked about the need of the spiritual master. We talked about why we can't do it ourselves. And then I want to say the qualifications of a spiritual master is what Srila Prabhupada talks here. So firstly, Srila Prabhupada says that the spiritual master must be 100% Krishna consciousness. And it's not about social position. One must be a master in Krishna consciousness. In other verses as well, Srila Prabhupada talks about it, like in the Srimad Bhagavatam in 11.3.21, Tasmat Guru Prapadyeta Chigyasha Shri Etama Shabdapare Chanishnatam Brahmani Upashama Shrayam. So therefore, any person who seriously desires the ultimate spiritual perfection must seek a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualifications of the bona fide guru is that he has realized the conclusions of the scriptures, by deliberation is able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities have taken shelter of the Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, should be understood to be bona fide spiritual masters. So here, Srila Prabhupada also talks about, who the spiritual master actually is, and not only should he be living by Vedic scriptures, but he should be able to convince others, and he has taken complete shelter of, the Supreme Personality, leaving all the material considerations. So that is, so that is a little bit on the spiritual master. So now I'll move on to the next paragraph. So, if economic development and material comforts could drive away one's lamentation for family, social, national, and international inebrities, then Arjuna would not have said that even an unrivaled kingdom on earth, or supremacy like that of the demigods and the heavenly planets, would be unable to drive away his lamentation. He sought therefore refuge in Krishna consciousness, and that is the right path for peace and harmony. Economic development or supremacy over the world can be finished at any moment by the catalysism of material nature. Even an elevation into a higher planetary situation, as men are now seeking on the moon planet, can also be finished at one stroke. The Bhagavad Gita confirms this, Shine Punya Martya Lokam Vishanti. When the result of pious activities are finished, one falls down again from the peak of happiness to the lowest status of life. Many politicians of the world have fallen down in that way. Such fall downs only constitute more causes for lamentation. So, I think, the essence of one of the points from this verse is really how we need to redefine what happiness actually means. So we think of, so the verse really shows that we won't get happiness. So Arjuna is saying he won't get happiness even if he has X, Y, Z. And really, the takeaway from this is that in the material world, we just can't get happiness. And what we think of happiness in the material world, it's not actually happiness, it's just relief. And I've often heard the example where if, someone's dunked you underwater and then kind of lifted you up, in that moment where you've been lifted up, you're like, you grasp for breath and it feels so good. So it's kind of likened to that. We think of that as happiness, but that's not actually happiness, that's just relief. So really what we need to understand is actually we can't get real happiness from the spiritual world. We can only get happiness when we're in touch with the divine. We can only get real happiness when the soul is happy. And the soul's method of happiness is when it's in contact with its source, when it's in contact with Krishna through service. And again, a big part of this verse is actually it's concentrated on the senses. So Arjuna is saying, I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. So again, our definition of happiness is often around sense gratification. So whatever will please my senses, whatever I can eat to please my tongue, whatever I can go to see, X, Y, Z, or what I can hear. But again, when we can redefine our happiness, and that is the happiness of the soul, then only can we actually really combat this grief, which is exactly what Arjuna is saying here, that nothing will be able to help me dispel this grief, this pain that exists here. And that's why he's approaching the spiritual master, to get that knowledge of how he can make the soul happy. So yeah, I've got here, it must be the happiness of the soul. The soul has nothing to do with the material world. And the only way the soul is happy is through its connection with God. So again, we must not try to solve for these four things, which cannot be counteracted. So the four things here are, birth, death, disease, and old age. Yeah, though they cannot be counteracted by the accumulation. In many parts of the world, there are states which are complete with all facilities of life, which are full of wealth and economic development. Yet the problems of material existence still exist. And it's said that even in some of the richest parts of the world, if you look at the happiness index, it's not there. You could see that it's yes, there's a certain degree up to where earning a certain amount or having certain material comforts actually is helpful and conducive to being happy. But after a while, very soon after that, plateaus. So it actually shows that our happiness is not to do with all the kind of things that we have around us. So really, we should try less to focus on trying to solve for these four things and these four issues that are mentioned in the purport, and rather we should try and focus more and more of our attention on trying to become Krishna conscious, trying to allow the soul to actually experience spiritual consciousness. So again, I'll finish off here with the last part of this purport, which is that where Arjuna is saying, therefore, if we want to curb lamentation for good, then we have to take shelter of Krishna, as Arjuna is seeking to do. So Arjuna asked Krishna to solve his problem definitely, and that is the way of Krishna consciousness. So again here, it's again and again said that, whenever we are going through any kind of grief or any of the issues, let's not take shelter in material pursuits, and let's instead take shelter of Krishna. Let's instead take shelter of spiritual knowledge. Let's instead take shelter of these beautiful books, because anytime we take shelter of anything material, there's two sides of the coin. The material world is filled with duality. So even if we do get a little bit of happiness, or if we do get a bit of relief, there's a flip side to that coin, which is the distress that comes with it. So really, we need to really train our mind. We need to train ourselves to redefine happiness, to redefine the solution to get out there. And the start to that, as Arjuna has shown through example, is to take shelter of the spiritual master, and to get instruction from him, and to surrender unto the spiritual master. So I'll stop there and see if anyone has any questions. Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda Sitaram Lakshmana Hanuman Ki Jai, Karanitai Ki Jai. Does anyone have any questions?
Does it just basically highlight that everything that we have here is temporary, basically, and just achieve full happiness? Yeah, so realize
Yeah, precisely that. Yes, everything here in the material world is temporary, and so why would we put our time and effort in trying to obtain that which is impermanent, that which is impure? So that's the kind of ignorance that we have around us, the ignorant covering that the soul has around us, and we need to break free from that. And instead, the soul is eternal, the soul is pure, and so naturally, what it wants is something that's also eternal, that's also pure, that's also all truth, all knowing, because that's constitutionally what the soul is, and so that's what it's really seeking. So don't,
Permanent, everything else is temporary. This is just like a body, or a vehicle, and the Atma is the thing that's permanent.
yes, exactly. So the spirit soul, or the Atma, is part and parcel of Krishna, and it is. And if you, I think later on in this chapter, it's just the Atma is described. It's never born, it never dies, it can never be killed, it can never be withered, it can never, all of these qualities. So that's eternal, but the spirit soul has multiple coverings. So covering of the subtle body, the covering of the physical body as well, and all of those things are yes, temporary and not eternal. Anyone else?
Just following up from his question, if we have an individual, do we have an individual soul, or is it a? Because then it is kind of like an identity attached to an individual soul, or is it that there isn't? Am I misunderstanding completely?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So every soul is its own identity and its own relationship with Krishna, and part of the spiritual path is to actually go back and find that identity, that relationship with Krishna. And actually, when I was hearing the talk that was given by Srila Prabhupada on this verse, he says that even the spirit soul has a body, spirit soul also has senses, but unlike what we have now, they're spiritual. It's a spiritual body, a spiritual senses. So even if you could only wear a glove if you have a hand, right? So in the same way, we only have the senses which are covering the spirit soul senses. But yes, each of us are very different and have our own individual personality, just like Krishna has his own individual personality. And through that individuality, we have very specific relationships and rasas, which are really individual to each one of us, and that's where we derive our individual happiness. Does that make sense? Sorry?
If whatever we do in the material world is temporary, then what can we do to nourish the soul?
Yeah. So your question is, if everything here in the material world is temporary, then what can we do to nourish the soul? So it's a spiritual path that we do here, that we have at the Bhaktivedanta Manor every day. So it's trying to take away our senses from everything that is distracting us in the material world and trying to go internally. So there's lots of ways to nourish the soul. So even through just reading every day, we nourish the soul, because it's kind of like we're going through amnesia right now because the soul is covered, right? And so by taking up to the devotional process, we reawaken everything that we've forgotten. So that's nourishing to us. What really nourishes the soul is service to others. So if you've ever tried to do service or to give to others, or if you've ever tried to, do something to make someone else happy, like that's a kind of happiness that it exists on a different level, right? So acts of service, reconnecting with eternal knowledge, devotee connections, chanting as well, because said that the holy name, that the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, is just another manifestation of God. So it's God is absolute. So therefore, every part of him, including his name, is captures his whole essence. So again, also by chanting, we can nourish the soul and until it finally, comes back into contact with its relationship with God.
Is it any kind of service? Because we hear that we do devotional service, we're automatically happy, but sometimes even we in service we learn something.
Your question is it any kind of service that we can do? Yeah. So I think it's said that when you get to a certain stage, it can be any service, and that would still nourish you because you know that that's pleasing Krishna. And when Krishna is pleased, we're automatically pleased. It's said that it's kind of said like if you try to, I don't know, feed the hand, like it doesn't work that way. You have to, you eat through the mouth and then the whole body is satisfied. So in that way, it's like you serve Krishna and then everything else is satisfied. So I think at a certain stage, very advanced devotees, whatever service they do, they find it pleasing. But I think in the lead up to that, we want to do services that are in line with our nature and what we have to offer, what we enjoy as well. So pick services that you enjoy doing and that nourish you. Does that answer your question?
So how do we know that what we are doing is actually service?
How do you know if what you're doing is actually service? That's a really good question. And I'm going to ask you that question back. What do you...
Because if I'm drawing, for example, or if I'm washing, or whatever, so, because some things we have to do anyway, and then some things, how do we know?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah. Yes.
Is service relative?
Service is...
Is it relative? So is there one service that's considered a higher service, or is it what you can do? If I give a leaf, is that service? Or if I get a bouquet, is that service?
Right. Yes. So Krishna accepts all service. So even in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, if you just give me a fruit and a flower and give it with love, I'll accept it. So I think the sentiment goes across everything. If whatever you do, if you do it with love, if you do it with the right intention, like, oh Krishna, I'm drawing this because I want to think of you. I want to grow my relationship with you. That's one type of service versus if you were doing some kind of drawing and your mind was somewhere else. So it's about where your consciousness is. It's about, I guess, is the result. It's the result. Like, what is it that allows you to think about Krishna? Because you could do what is seen as the highest service, and you can be behind the altar and dressing Radha Krishna. But if your consciousness is somewhere else, is that really service? And then there's this verse which I forget, but it said that all our activities should lead up to whatever gets us to think about Krishna. And so even if outwardly you're doing something which maybe isn't so, deemed as being God conscious or whatever, but if internally your mood and you're with Krishna, then I would think that would count as service, because the ultimate goal is to be Krishna conscious. Yes?
If someone is feeling extremely depressed and has lost faith in God, what can they do?
If someone is feeling extremely depressed and has lost faith in God, what can they do? Okay. It's a very hard question. In fact, I think there's some people who do go through really tragic events in their life, and because of that they just leave, and that's sort of the end of it. But then there's other people who, even whilst they're really upset at God and really angry at God, they will continue the process. And I think just through persevering, you could see that Krishna has a plan behind everything. And actually the concept of good and bad is again related to the material world. It's our identification with the material world. But actually there is no such thing as good or bad in this material world. I mean, there is no concept of good and bad. Everything when we're in Krishna consciousness is good for us, is the Lord's mercy. But I suppose in practical terms, what can one do? Yeah, I would have to think about that. It's really difficult.
It's hard because some people might, like let's say if you're out talking in the streets to people and you're like, oh, this has happened in the world and this has happened to me. How is like, you know, if there was God, this wouldn't happen. That's a big argument.
Yes. Well,
And it's hard to, like, how can we counter that and help people realize?
yeah. Well, firstly, I think what makes us feel that way is our expectation of the material world. So Krishna very clearly says, Dukhalayam Shashvatam, this whole material world is filled with miseries. So if we already knew that and we didn't have any other expectation, then sometimes I feel like our depression and stuff comes because expectations don't meet reality. But if we understand that Krishna is actually telling us that this material world is filled with miseries, so get out of here, right? So if someone is depressed and they can understand that no matter what you do, that's the condition of the material world. So instead of trying to fix it, and that's what today's verse was about, instead trying to fix it through material means, take the spiritual road and go back to Godhead, because that is just here. And we say that, oh, you know, if God was there, why would, you know, X, Y, Z happen? Because, you know, God is benevolent. But that's where karma comes into play. And it's not that Krishna is giving us this karma, that's just the law of nature. Like with, you know, Newton's law, or like whatever comes down must go up, or every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So that's just the laws of nature. So whatever negative is happening to us, it's just the laws of nature that, you know, have happened, you know, from past lives or this lives, but we just don't have that broader picture of it. So it's not that Krishna's doing that to us, that's just the laws of nature. But anyways, don't bother trying to find happiness here, which the whole verse is really about. It's happiness. It's about helping that person to redefine happiness and not try to find happiness in the material world, but trying to find happiness at the level of the soul. And so if you have someone like that, you can try and engage them in devotional service through serving others, or to taking up some other beautiful processes of devotional service. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
All suffering is like a mental platform.
Yes.
Some people, this is a bit huge statement, you know, but suffering is of the mind.
Yes.
So when I understand separate matter from spirit, you know, we understand the science, and then we can tolerate the pushings and the pullings of material nature, which certainly we have measured. Yet no one can escape. And at some point, my turn will come, someone else's turn. That's the setup for particular energy. Today's me, tomorrow's you, it's someone else's. But the best thing is to be, just be available for others to serve when they're going through some difficulty. Sometimes we can't explain or we can't fully understand. We can just serve. And they'll accept it. Because that they will remember. Probably even more than the suffering in the end.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. Actually, that's one of my favorite verses from the Bhagavatam, which you were just talking about. But the chapter of the Avanti Brahmana in Canto 11. So the Avanti Brahmana, he's, you know, completely been pushed out by his family. As he's a walking Brahmana, yeah, you know, people are spitting on him, and, you know, he's going through all kinds of suffering. So the verse is, if you say that these people are the cause of my happiness and distress, then where is the place of the soul in such a conception? This happiness and distress pertain not to the soul, but to the interaction of material bodies. If someone bites his tongue with his own teeth, at whom can he become angry at his suffering? So that's one more verse, and then my other absolute favorite one is, just go through that. Yes, no, sorry. It directly talks about all suffering existing in the mind. I don't know, sorry, Prabhu, if you remember which one it was, where it says it's not your karma, it's not the demigods, it's only the mind. There, the Brahmana says, these people are not the cause of my happiness and distress. Neither are the demigods, my own body, the planets, my past work or time. Rather, it is the mind alone that causes happiness and distress and perpetuates the rotation of material life. So it's only in the mind. And actually, it's in this chapter, where in chapter 3, that Krishna says it's raga and dvesha are attachments and aversions which cause suffering. Because when we have deep-seated attachments and aversions, so an aversion is anything. When we're attached to something, if anything comes in the middle of it, we become angry, we develop all these emotions, and that all of those emotions, all of that is programming of the mind. And so Krishna actually says in those verses that don't let raga dvesha, don't let attraction and aversion actually be, because it's a big stumbling block. So everything exists on the mental platform. Of course, we can't say that to everyone because it's so strong, the programming, but yeah. Okay, we'll end there. Thank you so much for being here this evening for the Bhagavad Gita class, and we have these every evening, so please do come. Hare Krishna.
just said automatically. Okay, yeah, yeah. Hare Krishna, the curtains will open.